Hello everyone, welcome to Greenbelt at Home virtual programming. Today we're going to have another edition of our Animal Ambassadors, and I'm probably just going to wait a minute or two as folks gather, because sometimes it takes folks a little bit while to realize that we're live, so we'll just give it a second. Again, from the Greenbelt Education Department, we hope everyone at home is having a safe and healthy New Year during these times, and we're really excited to share with you one of our little friends today who is staring directly up at me from inside of his container. So again, we'll give folks another minute or two to join us before we start discussing our next animal ambassador. So I'm hoping that we have some folks on now. So again, my name is Christopher Ricker. I'm one of the environmental educators here at the Greenbelt, and welcome to our Greenbelt at Home virtual program, Animal Ambassadors. So for those who joined us last time for our Animal Ambassador program, they were able to meet Flower, which was our red-eared slider. He was a turtle. And today we are going to meet Harry. And Harry is one of our High Rock Park Animal Ambassadors. So every year Harry gets to meet hundreds and hundreds of school children and other members of our community to be an ambassador for his kind. So to teach our park patrons and school students why it's important to protect natural spaces and habitat for individuals like Harry. And so I'm sure all of you at home can guess that Harry is a snake, right? And snakes belong to the reptiles, right? So what makes a reptile a reptile? Well, let's take a look at Harry. So one of the first things we notice about Harry is that Harry has scales. So there are some animals that have scales like fish, but reptiles are known for scales. So that's one of the ways we can tell that Harry the snake is a reptile. Secondly, Harry is cold-blooded. And so what does that mean? Does it mean his blood is cold? Not necessarily. What cold-blooded means is that things like snakes, turtles, lizards, all reptiles depend on the temperature of their environment to create energy, to metabolize energy. And so a lot of times during spring and summer months you might see turtles or snakes out basking in the sun. And what that's doing is helping them to convert food into energy, to bring their body up to a certain temperature where they're able to be more active so that they can continue to look for food and water, look for other snakes to reproduce with, or to just generally live and exist. Right, so now we know we have scales, we're cold-blooded, and so what other things tell us that this is a reptile? Well, let's think about what kind of snake Harry is. So Harry is a western hognose snake. And we know that because he has that little stump of a nose that kind of is pushed upright like a hoe. And so that's for moving within his environment, which is usually places like meadows and prairies and sandy, like riverbanks. And he'll use that nose to kind of shovel up and look for his favorite food, which are things like frogs and toads and salamanders. They will also eat rodents, and sometimes they will find small bird nests. And in the wild, they can actually swallow an entire egg, which is crazy to think that that little head's going to swallow an egg. But snakes, like some other reptiles, also have a very elastic jawline. So they're able to kind of, it's not really unhinging it, but it's this bony cartilage that's able to stretch really, really wide and swallow up an egg whole, or a larger rodent, another snake, or a big puffy toad. Now, hognose snakes actually specialize in hunting toads, And we know that because hognose snakes are actually rear-fanged venomous snakes. And that's a big conversation that a lot of people have in the reptile community and in the science community is, if that's a venomous snake, how are you holding it? Well, just because something is venomous doesn't mean it's dangerous. And that's the difference between just say something like a hognose and a king cobra. I would never be keeping a king cobra this close to my face, but I would put Harry pretty close to my face because hognose snakes are not dangerous. Now, those rear fangs, while they do inject a little bit of venom into the toad, they're really used as like a popping device. So when that toad puffs up, because that's its adapted defense mechanism, Harry the hognose snake will chew on that toad and kind of deflate him a little bit, which is a little gross, right? You're thinking of like deflating a toad, but that's a part of nature. And hognose snakes in particular are really important because they are immune to the toxins that are inside of toads. One of the few organisms that can eat a plethora of different toad species in the southwest United States and not get sick or die from that toxin. So if you were to remove individuals like western hognose snakes from their environment, the toad population would skyrocket, and that would affect the entire ecosystem. So things that toads prey on might completely disappear, or they might just breed to a population size that's beyond the carrying capacity, and then you could see a huge decrease in that toad population all at once to an unsafe level. So they're really important apex predators when it comes to toads within their environment. Now, we were mentioning before what makes a reptile a reptile. Now, a lot of reptiles lay eggs, which is one of the characteristics that makes something a reptile. And in this case, western hognose snakes do lay eggs, but not all snakes lay eggs. So it's pretty cool that hognose snakes do lay eggs, and they can lay anything from between 5 and 20 eggs at a time. And hognose snakes, when they hatch, they're pretty much just miniature versions of their adults. They can be 5 inches long or a little bit longer when they come out of the egg. And that's really important because an animal that's being hatched from the egg that's not guarded by its mother, right? So, you know, things like birds will continue to nurture and rear their young, bring them food, teach them how to fly. Hognose snakes will not do that. They're going to bury their eggs in the sand and they're just going to leave them. So when those little eggs or those little snakes hatch from their eggs, they need to be ready to go. They need to be able to camouflage into their environment, to find food, to escape predation. So they're born as little miniature versions of their parents, rip raring, ready to go. So you can also see that Harry is flicking out his tongue, and what he's doing is he's actually tasting the air around him. He's pulling that tongue back into something which is called a Jacobson's organ, which basically transfers the smell that he's bringing into his brain and says, that's a mouse, that's a water bowl, that's Christopher, that's Karen holding the camera. So he can tell everything about his environment by flicking that tongue out. Something that might be a little challenging to see is that Harry has what's known as keeled scales. Keeled scales kind of look like the bottom of a boat, like a hull of a ship, where they come to a ridge, and they're hard and raised because that helps Harry move through really sandy environments. So sandy substrates, and you can see he's just kind of moving there. So he's on the table, so he's not moving as fluidly as he would if he was on the ground or in a sandy environment. And something else you'll notice as you're going up and down Harry is that coloration and that pattern, which has sort of two different functions. Firstly, it's really great camouflage for the environments that Harry lives in, as I've mentioned, in the Southwest. But it's also a little bit of mimicry, because there's another snake that lives in the Southwest that looks really similar to this. And maybe you already guessed it, but that's some of the crotalus species, or the western rattlesnake species. So we have western diamondbacks and red diamondbacks, Mojave rattlesnakes. There's a whole bunch of different rattlesnake species in the Southwest that overlap with western hognoses. And so if a bird or a coyote or a fox came over, right, at first glance, Harry might look like a rattlesnake. If that first glance didn't work, something else that hognoses will do is actually shake their tail like a rattle down in the substrate, in the leaf litter, in the dry pine needles, and they'll hiss and puff themselves up and kind of mimic a rattlesnake. But they're actually not as tough as rattlesnakes. So if that predator continues to push the rattlesnake, the next defense mechanism is that hognose snakes will actually play dead. They'll open their mouth, they'll stick their tongue out, they'll roll on their back, and they'll spew a really, you hear that? I think he's a little bit startled by the camera, so he's making a hiss noise, just like we were talking about that rattlesnake. And you can see he's flattening his head out a little bit, kind of like a cobra. And that's because he's a little bit nervous. He's like, I don't know what's going on with all this movement around me, right? So that's his defense mechanism, just like a rattlesnake. But if we kept pushing it, like I said, he'd eventually play dead and spew this really gross musk out of his bum, or also known as his vent, the cloaca. See? And that's that rattlesnake kind of defense. So he's like, man, I don't know about this camera. It keeps coming in real close. This table's doesn't feel like my tank, so he's a little bit nervous. But again, like I said, Harry is used to us, but just like any other animal, just like you at home, sometimes you have your cranky days. I know if I don't get enough to eat in the afternoon, I get pretty cranky too. So, but like I said before, he might flip over and play dead, and on the underside, there's a really unique pattern you can see here of some like bright oranges and blacks, very different from the top of Harry's, more of his dorsal. So his vent side is a little brighter. And I think we can hypothesize that, if he's flipping over, playing dead, but also showing these bright colors, that might really confuse a predator as well. And they'd be like, I don't know if I want to eat this dead thing that pretended to be a rattlesnake and now is flashing all these orange and black colors at me. So there's quite a few different mechanisms of defense that have been evolved over thousands and thousands of years from where they live within the United States. So western hognose snakes, though they aren't endangered or critically endangered across the U.S., on some local and state levels, they are labeled as threatened or endangered, and most of that is because of habitat loss, because of development, particularly in like the prairie meadow regions of moving out of the Midwest towards the Southwest. There's been a lot of homes and cities and things developed, and because these guys really like specific prairie and meadow type habitats, those environments are being lost each and every single day with new development. Of course, people need places to live, but because of that, many states like Iowa and Illinois have put the western hognose on threatened or endangered list. And there's continued conservation efforts to try to protect their habitat. Because, like we mentioned, they're really, really important animals. Like other reptiles, a lot of times they're either apex predators or keystone indicator species. They can tell us the health of any ecosystem by their presence. So, again, this is Harry for those of you who are joining us right now for our Greenbelt at Home Animal Ambassador program. So something else worth mentioning is that during the breeding season for hognose snakes, which is generally spring and summer, males and females will pair up with multiple different hognose snakes throughout the season, which heightens the likelihood of a female becoming gravid and being able to have a successful clutch of eggs that season. And Harry is a pretty small snake. He'll probably get girthier with age. Western hognose can grow from 1 foot to 3 feet. depending just on their genetics and where they're from, and there's some regional variations in size as well. You can see that S movement that he's just kind of making, and that's similar to what he'd be making if he was out in the sand. Excellent. So a lot of folks come to the Greenbelt for school programs or other public programs, and when we pull out Harry, some people get nervous, and that's okay, because a lot of people are afraid of snakes, right? They're really alien compared to us. They don't have any legs, they don't have any eyelids, they smell with their tongue. Sometimes they lay eggs, sometimes they give live birth. But here in Staten Island, we do not have any venomous snakes that live out in our parks. So you are safe from native snakes on Staten Island. And even snakes like hognose snakes, which are rear fang and mildly venomous, if you see them in places like New Jersey, where the eastern hognose snake lives, you're still okay and safe. Even if you were to come across a rattlesnake, or if you're in Florida, a coral snake, you'd probably be a lot safer leaving it alone. Some people try to kill venomous snakes because they're afraid, but snakes are just trying to do what they do. They don't want to waste their venom on you, right? And by trying to kill one, you would just be putting yourself in harm's way. So we should live and let be, recognize that even snakes that are dangerous to human beings help protect us. We mentioned earlier that hognose snakes help to keep toad populations down, but other snakes also help to keep rodent populations down. And that's really important for us humans because, what do we need that rodents sometimes can mess with? Well, most of our food comes from farms, and so by having snakes around agricultural facilities, you're minimizing the risk of rodents getting into your crops and eating your vegetables. You're also minimizing the risk of rodents getting into things like grain or hay, where rodents would go to the bathroom and can cause disease to human beings. So snakes are really, really important in our ecosystems. They're important in our parks, and they're important to keep our planet healthy and happy. So again, Mr. Harry gets to share that information with hundreds of school kids every year here at High Rock Park. So on behalf of Greenbelt Education, Greenbelt at Home, and Harry, we want to thank you all for joining another edition of Greenbelt Animal Ambassadors. If you all are interested in more virtual opportunities, you can go to our events calendar at sigreenbelt.org, or you can visit our YouTube page, the Staten Island Greenbelt. So again, we have some great upcoming virtual content and programs for you in the coming weeks. So we hope that you will all join us again shortly. So we'll see you all soon. Have a good one.